It started with an invitation. I know that sounds strange, but I still remember the moment it arrived. It was the kind of thing I never thought I'd see, let alone respond to. It didn't come in the form of a letter, a text, or an email. No, it came in the most ordinary way possible, through a small, plain envelope sitting on our kitchen counter, as though it had just appeared there. My name is Lucas, and if I'm being honest, I never thought of myself as the kind of person who would end up in the middle of something like this. I live a quiet life, routine, predictable. My job is simple. I'm a systems analyst at a tech company, and it's not the most glamorous career, but it pays the bills. I'm the kind of guy who thrives in stability, and I married Sarah because she felt like the anchor to my life. We've been together for almost 8 years, and I thought we were good. Hell, I thought we were perfect. But it all came crashing down because of that envelope. It was late on a Thursday evening when I first saw it. I was getting back from the gym, trying to burn off the stress of the day. Sarah had been working late, as usual, which wasn't out of the ordinary. She'd been in a whirlwind at her new job as a marketing director, but I had no reason to be concerned. She'd text me occasionally, and I'd do the same. Everything seemed fine. The invitation itself looked like a joke at first. No return address, no fancy design, just a plain white card that read, "You are invited. Don't ask questions. Come alone." I stared at the words for a good minute, unsure if I was reading it right. I turned it over to check for any kind of signature or note, but there was nothing, just an address scrawled in messy handwriting, 7B, Willow Street. Now, here's the thing. I knew the area, but I'd never heard of anyone living at that address. It was an old, rundown part of town, the kind of place that most people avoided. No one I knew lived there, and certainly no one would send me an invitation from there. I tried to shake it off. My first instinct was to toss it in the trash and forget about it. But the thought gnawed at me, and my curiosity took over. It was strange. It was bizarre. I had to admit, it intrigued me. I didn't tell Sarah about the invitation at first. I didn't want to sound like a fool or risk worrying her for no reason. The next morning, I spent the whole day thinking about it. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just some random prank. But the more I thought about it, the more the mystery gnawed at me. After work, I decided I was going to go. I didn't know why, but I felt like I had to. I'm not the type to do things like this. I don't take risks. I don't jump into the unknown. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see where this would lead. I got in my car, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. I drove through the city, the streets becoming less familiar the further I went. Finally, I turned onto Willow Street. It was a narrow road, lined with old houses that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. It was eerie, almost abandoned, and the lights seemed dimmer here. I could barely make out the numbers on the houses. When I arrived at 7B, Willow Street, I almost didn't believe it. The house was small, hidden behind a tall, rusted gate. It looked wrong. It didn't belong there, not in this neighborhood. But the address matched, and I couldn't turn back now. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding, and walked toward the gate. I reached for the gate handle, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A security camera above the front door pointed directly at me. It felt like the whole place was watching me. I swallowed hard, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. The front door opened with a creak as if it had been waiting for me. I stood frozen for a second, debating whether I should turn around and leave. But my feet were already moving, as if something, or someone, was pulling me forward. As I walked into the hallway, the door slammed shut behind me, making me jump. I quickly spun around, but there was no one there. The place was eerily silent. The walls were lined with strange paintings, none of them familiar, all abstract, dark. It felt wrong. I took a deep breath and kept walking. My mind was racing with questions. What was going on? Who had invited me here? What did this all mean? Then I heard a sound, a soft voice from the other room. "You're late." I froze. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. My heart raced as I turned towards the source, every nerve on edge. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, but I couldn't see anyone. The voice had come from deeper within the house, somewhere just out of sight. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly, though I tried to sound calm. No response. I was left alone with my questions and the oppressive quiet of the house. I glanced around, unsure of what to do next. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, with only a single, flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It cast long shadows on the walls, and every time I shifted my gaze, I thought I saw something move, just out of the corner of my eye. I could feel the air growing heavier, as if the house itself was alive, watching me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I approached the room where the voice had come from, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The door at the end of the hallway was ajar, barely open. I couldn't see what was inside, but I knew, deep down, that whatever lay beyond that door would answer my questions, or at least give me some clue as to why I was here. I reached for the door, hesitated for just a second, and then pushed it open. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. The room was large, more of a living area than anything else, though it was furnished with strange, antique furniture that looked out of place in a house like this. The walls were covered with even more unsettling paintings, each one more bizarre than the last. But the strangest part? The center of the room. A large, ornate chair sat in the middle of the space, facing away from me. It was high-backed and dark, almost menacing in its simplicity. And there, seated in the chair, was a figure, shrouded in darkness, their face hidden by the shadows. "You've come," the voice said again, this time clearer, though still eerily calm. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I swallowed hard, trying to control the wave of panic rising in my chest. I could barely make out the figure's outline, but I could tell they were watching me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, unsure whether I even wanted an answer. For a moment, there was only silence. The figure didn't move. They just sat there, still and unmoving. And then, in a voice that seemed to vibrate with an almost unnatural calm, they spoke again. "Does it matter?" they asked, the words sending an uncomfortable shiver down my spine. "You came here of your own accord. You chose to walk into this house." I couldn't explain it, but that response, cold, detached, made something in me snap. This wasn't just a strange encounter. It was something deeper, something I wasn't prepared for. I stepped into the room fully, ignoring the instinct telling me to leave. I had to know. Why me? I demanded, my frustration creeping into my voice. Why was I invited here? What is this place? The figure shifted slightly, but still didn't stand or reveal itself fully. Instead, they spoke as though they were reciting something they had said countless times before. "You're here because you're not supposed to be. This is the point of no return." I didn't understand. My mind was spinning, trying to grasp what was happening. The words felt like a riddle, but I wasn't sure I wanted to solve it. Suddenly, the figure rose from the chair. I took an instinctive step back, but they didn't move toward me. They simply stood there, looming, almost as if they were sizing me up. "Everyone has a breaking point," the figure said softly, almost thoughtfully. "Everyone reaches a moment when they can no longer go back to the life they had before. This is your moment, Lucas." I froze. How did they know my name? The figure finally took a step into the light, and I could see their face. It was a woman, her features sharp, but somehow unnerving. Her eyes, however, were what caught my attention the most. They were dark, unblinking, like the eyes of someone who had seen too much, and yet, there was a calmness in them, an understanding that sent a chill down my spine. "I don't know you," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or to myself at this point. "I don't understand any of this." "That's the point," she said with a thin smile. "You're not supposed to understand. Not yet." I felt a strange pull toward her words, as though something was shifting inside me. Something I couldn't explain. She tilted her head slightly, as if contemplating my confusion. "Do you know why you're really here, Lucas?" My throat felt dry, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Everything inside me screamed to leave, to run as fast as I could. But the strange magnetism of the moment kept me rooted to the spot. I was invited," I said weakly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I don't know why." She nodded slowly, her smile widening just a fraction. "Exactly. You don't know. But that's about to change." The room seemed to grow colder, and the shadows around her deepened. "You have a choice, Lucas," she said, her voice softening to a whisper. "You can leave now. Forget all of this. Go back to your life, as though nothing happened." I stared at her, unable to speak. "Or," she continued, her tone darkening, "you can choose to stay and learn what happens when the past is left behind." The air in the room felt thicker now, like a weight pressing against my chest. Her words hung in the space between us, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to speak. Every part of me screamed to walk away, to flee this strange, unsettling place. But I didn't move. My body was frozen, caught in the web of her gaze. She was waiting for me to respond, her eyes dark and unreadable, studying me like an experiment. "Leave, and nothing changes," she said, her voice suddenly lighter, almost playful. "You go back to your life, your routines, your quiet existence. It's that easy. But if you stay..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. My heart pounded in my chest. I had no idea what was happening, but I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't undo. I took a shaky breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "Why me?" The words escaped before I could stop them. She tilted her head again, as if amused by my confusion. "That's always the question, isn't it?" she replied softly. "Why you? Why anyone? Maybe it's because you're already closer to the truth than you think." The truth. I wasn't sure what that meant, but somehow, her words struck a chord. I had a feeling this wasn't just some random encounter. This was fate, or maybe it was something darker. But my curiosity, no, my need to understand, was stronger than the fear gnawing at my stomach. I stepped closer, my voice barely a whisper. "What happens if I stay?" The woman's smile grew, her eyes flashing with something unreadable. "You'll learn what lies beyond the things you can't explain. What you thought you knew about the world, about yourself, will be shattered." A cold chill crawled up my spine. The weight of her words was too much to ignore. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to turn and run out the door, forget all of this ever happened. But something inside me, the same thing that had brought me here, held me in place. She waited, as if knowing I was torn. "You're already at a crossroads, Lucas. Every choice you make from here on out will lead you down a path you can never return from. But it's your decision. Do you leave, or do you discover the truth?" I felt like I was suffocating, caught between the need to know and the fear of what I might uncover. My thoughts were a mess, swirling with questions, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back. Not after everything I had seen. I glanced one last time at the door behind me, then back at her. My heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking with uncertainty. "I'll stay." Her smile widened, but this time, there was something darker in it. Wise choice. Before I could react, the room shifted. The walls seemed to close in, the dim lighting flickering as though the very house itself was alive, responding to the decision I'd just made. The floor beneath me creaked, and a low hum filled the air, like the sound of machinery starting up. I couldn't move, my legs heavy, as if the house itself was holding me in place. And then, without warning, the woman turned and walked toward a door I hadn't noticed before, hidden in the far corner of the room. "Follow me," she called over her shoulder, her voice now smooth and cold. "Your journey begins now." I had no choice but to follow. My feet moved before I could fully process what was happening. Every step felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I couldn't escape. As I crossed the threshold of the door, the world I knew seemed to vanish. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The air felt colder here, thick with an almost palpable tension. I stepped inside, the sound of my feet scraping against the old floorboards echoing in the silence. The woman was already several steps ahead, her figure barely visible in the dim light. "Keep up," she said without turning around, her voice sharp. "We don't have much time." I swallowed hard, my heart thumping in my chest. What had I gotten myself into? I had no idea where this was leading, but I couldn't turn back now. Every instinct told me to leave, to escape before it was too late, but curiosity, no, something deeper, was keeping me rooted in place. The hallway stretched on, endless and narrow, the walls lined with old, faded paintings that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I tried to focus on my surroundings, but the air felt too thick, like it was pressing against me, making it hard to breathe. She stopped at a door at the end of the hallway, her hand resting lightly on the handle. The moment she touched it, the lights above us flickered and buzzed, casting strange shadows along the walls. The woman turned back to face me, her eyes now cold, calculating. "Are you ready for what's behind this door?" she asked, her voice low. I hesitated, my throat dry. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. But I nodded anyway, my body betraying my better judgment. She pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with dark, swirling fog. It looked like something out of a nightmare, the air thick with mystery and dread. In the center of the room, there was a large, circular table covered in strange symbols and markings I didn't recognize. "You wanted the truth, Lucas," she said, her voice softer now, almost as if she was speaking to herself. "But be careful what you ask for." I stepped forward, my mind racing. What was all of this? What did it mean? I didn't know, but I had to find out. I had already crossed the line. There was no turning back. The woman motioned toward the table. "Sit. The answers you seek are right here, but they won't come for free." I walked slowly toward the table, the fog seeming to part around me as I moved. The symbols on the surface of the table pulsed with a faint light, casting an eerie glow on the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like eyes were hidden in the shadows, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I sat down, my palms sweating as they rested on the cold surface of the table. The woman stood behind me now, silent, her presence looming like a shadow. I could feel the weight of her gaze on my back, but I didn't dare turn around. "This is where it all begins," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You will see things you never thought possible. But remember, once you start this journey, there's no going back." I wanted to ask her what that meant, but before I could, the symbols on the table began to glow brighter, their light flickering in time with my heartbeat. The room seemed to pulse with energy, and I felt my body tense, my breath quickening. Suddenly, the ground beneath me seemed to shift, as if the very foundation of the house was moving. The walls bent inward, and the fog thickened, swirling around me, filling the air with a heavy, suffocating pressure. The woman's voice broke through the chaos. "You've made your choice. Now, let's see how far you're willing to go." Before I could respond, the symbols on the table erupted with light, blinding me for a split second. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light vanished. I was no longer in the room. The world around me shifted, like the very air had been rearranged. I blinked, disoriented, trying to steady myself. The room I was in felt both familiar and alien at the same time. The walls were bare, stripped of everything except for a single door at the far end, glowing faintly in the dim light. I stood up, my legs unsteady, as though I had just woken up from a deep sleep. My heart was pounding, a mixture of fear and confusion bubbling inside me. What just happened? Where was I? I turned around, hoping to see some clue, some hint of what was going on, but the room was empty. There was no woman, no symbols on the table, just silence. I reached out to touch the walls, half expecting them to vanish like a mirage, but they were solid, cold to the touch. The door at the far end of the room seemed to beckon me. It wasn't just the faint glow coming from beneath it. It felt like it was calling to me, as if I had no choice but to approach it. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to find my way back to the safety of the life I knew. But something else, the same curiosity that had led me here, pushed me forward. I walked toward the door slowly, the floor creaking beneath my feet with every step. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. I reached the door and, without thinking, turned the handle. The door opened into a completely different world. At first, it looked like a city, but everything about it was wrong. The buildings were twisted, their shapes contorted in unnatural angles, as if the laws of physics didn't apply here. The streets were eerily quiet, no sound of life, no people walking by. The sky above was a deep, sickly red, clouds swirling in chaotic patterns. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. It felt like I had stepped into a nightmare. And yet, the cold air against my skin told me it was real. I took a tentative step forward, my heart racing with each movement. The city stretched on, its twisted architecture looming in the distance, inviting me to explore. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. As I walked further, I heard something, faint at first, but growing louder with every step. A sound. Footsteps, perhaps, but no one was in sight. I quickened my pace, looking around, desperate to find some sign of life. That's when I saw them. Shadows moving in the corners of my vision, darting just out of reach. They were there, but they were hiding, watching. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding strange in this surreal place. No answer. I pushed forward, the city stretching out before me, seemingly endless. The shadows were growing bolder now, moving in and out of the periphery of my vision, and I knew I wasn't alone. I stopped in my tracks when I heard a voice. It was faint, almost a whisper, but it came from behind me. "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, but there was no one. The street was empty. A knot twisted in my stomach. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. And then, through the fog of confusion and fear, I realized something. I wasn't just a visitor in this place. I was a part of it now. I stood there, frozen, as the voice echoed in my mind. "You're not supposed to be here." I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was watching me. The city, with its twisted architecture and unnatural stillness, felt suffocating, like it was closing in around me. I tried to move, but my legs felt heavy, as though the ground beneath me was pulling me down. The shadows lingered in my peripheral vision, their forms flickering in and out of sight. I wanted to run, to get away from this place, but my feet remained rooted to the spot. "Who's there?" I called out again, my voice cracking. Silence answered. But the feeling of being watched only intensified. It was as if the city itself knew I didn't belong here, that I was an intruder. The air felt thick, almost alive, pressing in on me from all sides. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move forward. I didn't know what I was hoping to find, but the door behind me, the one I'd just come through, was already gone, vanished, as if it had never existed. My heart raced as I took another step, then another. I had to keep moving. The more I looked around, the more the shadows seemed to grow, to stretch, to gather. I couldn't escape them. I could feel them drawing closer, surrounding me like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. I broke into a run, not knowing where I was headed, just desperate to put some distance between myself and the unseen force creeping up on me. But the city, this nightmare of a place, seemed endless. The more I ran, the farther the horizon stretched, as though the city was infinite, its layout shifting with every step I took. I stumbled to a stop in front of a massive building that loomed in the distance. It was different from the others, taller, more imposing, its windows dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring out into the void. A strange feeling washed over me as I approached it, an undeniable sense that whatever I was looking for, whatever this place was, it was inside. With a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The interior of the building was as bizarre as the city itself. The walls were lined with mirrors. No, not mirrors. Pools of liquid that reflected distorted versions of reality. Each one shimmered with a different scene. A person sitting at a desk, a child playing in a park, a street corner I swore I'd passed earlier. As I walked deeper into the room, the images seemed to shift and change, almost as if they were alive, breathing, reacting to my every movement. A voice came from behind me, soft, but unmistakable. "You're finally here." I turned quickly, but there was no one. The room was empty, except for the reflections. And then I saw it. A figure in one of the pools of liquid. It was me, but not quite. The version of myself that I saw in the reflection wasn't the same as the person standing in front of it. He looked older, worn, his eyes filled with something dark, something I didn't recognize. I took a step closer, my heart pounding as the reflection seemed to blink at me. It didn't move like I did. It was watching me, studying me, as if it knew me better than I knew myself. I reached out a hand, drawn to it against my will. My fingers brushed against the liquid surface, and for a moment, everything went still. The reflection smiled. That's when I heard the whisper again, this time clearer, sharper, cutting through the silence. "It's too late for you." I jerked my hand back, my pulse racing, but the reflection didn't disappear. It stayed there, watching me, its eyes dark and knowing. I couldn't tear myself away. The voice came again, this time from the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. "You've already made your choice, Lucas. You just don't know what it means yet." The shadows seemed to shift, forming into something darker, something more menacing. The temperature in the room dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure in the reflection spoke again, but this time it wasn't in a whisper. It was in my own voice. "You're becoming part of the story now. You'll never leave this place. Not now. Not after what you've done." The walls seemed to close in, the mirrors pulsating with light. I backed away, my chest tightening with fear, but no matter how far I moved, the reflection, that version of me, stayed, its eyes locked on mine. And then, the shadows lunged. I didn't have time to react. The shadows came at me, rushing from the corners of the room with a speed I couldn't comprehend. They were alive, fluid, twisting, coiling like smoke, but with weight, substance, as if they were made of pure fear. I stumbled back, my legs shaking, but the darkness followed, crawling up the walls and across the floor toward me. I tried to scream, but the air was thick, choking me, suffocating my words before they could escape. My breath was ragged as I darted toward the nearest door. The darkness was relentless, pushing at my heels, almost as if it was pulling me back into the room I had just left. I slammed into the door, throwing my shoulder against it, praying it would give way. Finally, it creaked open. I didn't hesitate. I bolted into the corridor beyond, my heart thudding in my chest, adrenaline flooding my veins. The hallway stretched out in front of me, endless and winding, like a maze I couldn't escape. The shadows were right behind me now, their presence pressing down on me with every step. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the darkness catch me. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing as I ran. The air grew colder, heavier, until I could see my breath in front of me. My feet slapped against the cold floor, echoing in the silence, each step taking me farther into the unknown. I turned a corner and nearly ran into a figure. It was a man, standing still in the middle of the hallway. His back was to me, but I could feel him, the same way I could feel the shadows. He didn't belong here. Help! I gasped, panic rising in my throat. Please. The man didn't move, didn't respond. I could see his hands were clasped together, but his body was unnervingly still. I wanted to ask again, but something in his posture, the way he stood, stopped me. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. As I took a step closer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man's reflection in the wall beside him wasn't right. It wasn't him. The reflection was distorted, twisted. His face was a shadow, just like the ones chasing me. You're too late, the reflection whispered, its voice deep and hollow. It's already begun. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the shadows were closing in. I stood there, paralyzed by fear, my eyes locked on the distorted reflection. The shadows pressed in around me, whispering, clawing at my mind, but something inside me snapped. The reflection wasn't me. It couldn't be. I wasn't some shadow, some twisted version of myself. I had to fight. With every ounce of strength, I forced myself to take a step back from the man, from the reflection, from the suffocating darkness. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart hammering in my chest. The shadows were still closing in, but now, I saw them for what they were, fragments of fear, of doubt. They weren't real. They were nothing but thoughts trying to pull me back into the nightmare. Enough, I whispered to myself, the words barely escaping my lips. But they carried power, a strength I didn't realize I had. The man, the figure in front of me, finally turned. His face was still obscured, but there was a softness to his posture, something that told me he wasn't an enemy. He stepped aside, allowing me a clear path, as though he was giving me the space to move forward. You can leave, he said, his voice calm. You always could have. The darkness was never inescapable. It was a choice. A choice. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't trapped in some alternate reality, some nightmare. I had created this. I had chosen to walk into this place. And I could choose to leave just as easily. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep, steadying breath. I didn't need to be afraid anymore. The shadows, the distorted reflections, the fear, it was all in my mind. I could walk away. I opened my eyes, and the hallway in front of me was no longer dark and twisted. It was clear, bright, the walls clean and solid. The fog lifted. The air felt lighter. I wasn't in some terrifying, endless maze anymore. I was back in control. The man stepped back, his form fading as the world around me shifted. He was gone, but I wasn't alone anymore. I felt free. The oppressive weight of the shadows was gone, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The door that had once been sealed shut stood open in front of me now, inviting me forward. I walked through it without hesitation, And as I crossed the threshold, the world I had entered vanished behind me. The cold, dark city was gone. The twisted architecture, the shadows, the fear, all of it had dissolved like mist in the sun. I was back in my life, my world. And this time, I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't just existing anymore. I was living. I had the power to choose, to break free from the fear, to create the life I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because I knew now, nothing could hold me back.